Welcome back to the channel. My name is Angela Tauscher. I am broker owner at Rover Realty in Mesa, Arizona. With this channel, I'll be sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly about living in Arizona. Whether you already live here and maybe you're unaware of some of the items I'll be sharing, or you're thinking about moving to Arizona, I'm going to share a little bit of everything in between, as well as events and new and upcoming businesses and projects coming to Arizona. So be sure to hit the like, subscribe, so that when I share a new item, you're the first to know about it. Today, we'll be jumping right in to talk about our homes in Arizona. What's different or unusual or something you might not be aware of if you're thinking of moving here from out of the area. Now, even if you do live here, I might share a few things today that you just didn't know about. So be sure to listen in. We will be covering some roofs, some HVAC systems, post-tension slab. What is that? Slab leaks, something else you might not have heard about, but you really should know because it's a common issue in Arizona. We'll also discuss HOAs. I know when I moved here from the Pacific Northwest, I didn't know what an HOA was. We've never lived in one. Our water, there's really some good, the bad, and the ugly there. Tune in, watch to the end, and I'll be sure to cover it all. Now, unlike the Pacific Northwest, we don't tend to see multiple layers of shingle roofs on our homes here. The other thing is, if the home has been slated to be a shingle roof home, you definitely need to keep the integrity of a shingle roof on it, as the truss system in the home has been built specifically for the weight of a shingle roof. If you're going to change that up and you wanted to put a different style roof, you really need to consult a professional roofer to make sure that you are good to go with that. We also see a lot of concrete tile roofs here in Arizona. That's one of the more common ones that you will see. Now, these roofs as well, we find will often last about 20 years. However, when it's time to replace them, usually what the roofers do here is they actually remove the concrete tiles. They stack them off to the side and they save them. And really what gets changed out or replaced on that concrete tile roof is the underlayment. The underlayment looks like a black tarping type system that is put down, and that is usually what gets changed out on those particular roofs. And then the same concrete tile usually is put right back on that roof, and then you're good to go typically for another 20 years or so, with the caveat that you keep the roof free of any debris, any trees hanging overhead. The last thing you want to do is have a lot of debris on the roof where they can build up, where you can create kind of a dam when we do get a lot of water from that debris. That's not good for your roof system. Same thing with something like pigeons I talked about in a prior episode. The pigeons can be very harmful with their pigeon poo on the roof, just eats right through some of our roofing systems. So that will be a very common roof that you will see here in Arizona on our Southwest style homes. Now, sometimes the tiles are all flat, sometimes they have that Spanish curve, but either way, it's predominantly the same style with an underlayment under the tile. Now, another roof system that we actually see here fairly often as well is we have a lot of Southwest homes that have a flat, just a very flat rooftop. And with those, it's typically what they call a foam roof. They do need some additional maintenance, a little bit more so than the shingle roof and the tile roof. So if you have that flat roof system, they're a little bit more subject to our heat and wear and tear from our elements. And so you'd want to have that roof just inspected by a professional roofer, every couple of years, to keep on top of that maintenance. It's much less expensive to do regular maintenance typically than to have to start all over if it goes too far past what it would need to maintain it. In a prior video, I talked actually a little bit about our post-tension slabs that we have here in Arizona. Not all of our homes have them, but a good chunk of our newer homes, and when I say new in Arizona, that's about a 20-year-old home, 20 to 30-year-old home, they often have what we call a post-tension slab. And that's because here in Arizona, we have very expansive soils. In many cases, it was farmland, and the soils just expands, contracts, moves all around. So one of the ways we've gotten around our homes cracking up from that expansive soil is to use what's called a post-tension slab. And what this is when the foundation is poured, they put down these cables that are under an extreme amount of tension that are designed specifically to hold that slab, that foundation together structurally, so it is not as subject to any movement with the soil. Now, one of the things you really should know about this is it can be very dangerous, can inflict injury, and sometimes the worst case scenario is death if you were to cut into that slab and cut through one of those cables. They are under such extreme tension, depending on the type of post-tension slab, can actually slice through the home and anything and anybody in its path. So not always the case, obviously. The suggestion here, you're going to hear it from just about any general contractor or builder that are in the industry in Arizona. If it's a post-tension slab, we highly, highly, highly recommend that you speak to a professional before cutting into the slab. Now, I know where I came from, it's really common that you'd cut into the foundation and, for example, you would install a safe and then you'd cover it up with something, and it was a really great place to have a safe. Here in Arizona, you can do that as well if it's post-tension slab, but there's professionals that will come out and they actually x-ray the slab to see where the cables are to make sure that if you're going to make a cut that you can safely do so. So before everybody comes for me, yes, I understand that it won't always kill you, but for the average person, the average homeowner, please seek a professional before cutting into your slab. Now, we do have homes, older homes, that don't have a post-tension slab, and obviously that'd be an entirely different situation. However, I cannot talk about post-tension slabs without talking about slab leaks. Now, slab leaks are really common in Arizona. I wouldn't be surprised if you asked a couple different people that lived here, have they ever dealt with a slab leak or knew of someone that had a slab leak, and you're probably going to get a yes. And that's because many of our water lines are run underneath that foundation. And so over time, wear and tear, as that water line breaks down, they get usually a small leak and then it turns into a bigger leak. But the problem is it's leaking under your slab, and typically most homeowners don't notice until they start to see a huge spike in their water bill, or randomly water's seeping up through the floorboards or some other portion of the house. Now, if you're concerned and you think you might have a slab leak, there's actually a pretty easy way to test for that. You would first and foremost turn everything off, all the water off to the house, and then you'll run out to look at the city meter. There's a city meter between the street and your house, the main water line, that will have, it looks like a pressure gauge on it. And you can see if all the water is off to the home, it should be at zero. It should not be moving. And you can test this because if you go back into the home and turn on your kitchen sink, for example, then run back out and look at the gauge again, you'll see movement. You'll see it's happening. The answer to the slab leak is if you turn everything off to the home water-wise and that gauge is still moving, you probably have a slab leak. Now, with a slab leak, it's not the end of the world. They don't have to, remove the house to get to it, even though it's under the foundation. A lot of times you'll call a plumber. They will do what's called a reroute. In other words, they're going to just find a good section of those water lines and they are going to reroute them all together into your home. Yes, this can be expensive. A lot of times the greatest part of the expense is actually in the possible damage that's done to the home to get to those water lines, and therefore the build back to make the home look good again. So often you're going to have possibly some flooring expense, maybe some drywall expense, paint and cosmetics to make that area look good again, because the plumber is going to do what they have to do to resolve and take care of that slab leak. So speaking of water, let's talk about water temperatures, our water composition. What does that look like? It's a little bit different in Arizona. As a matter of fact, growing up in the Northwest, it was really common that we just drink right out of the sink. Most people in Arizona do not do that. There's a couple things that you really want to know about our Arizona water. First and foremost is that there are several months of the year that is really common that you won't have cold water. I know, it's crazy. It's just shocking. The first time I had this happen, I thought something was wrong with our water in our house, but the temperatures just get hot enough a couple months of the year that there is a very good chance you will not get cold water in your home. It's just what it is. Now, the other thing is our water has a lot of calcium in it, and that calcium can be really hard on the water lines in the home. It's really hard on, the water systems, and you'll see it because it does this calcium buildup, on your faucets and your shower heads. And one of the ways that a lot of people in Arizona counteract that is they get what's called a water softener system. Now, this is an add-on item that you can put in your home that conditions that water to remove some of the minerals and the calcium, so it just feels better on your skin. These systems, they can range anywhere from a couple $100s to thousands of dollars. You will often see the actual water softener is in the garage. Sometimes you'll just see that it's been plumbed and hardlined ready to add a water softener, which is good because that's typically, $300-400 for a plumber to plumb it and have that ready, that loop. It's called a water softener loop in the garage. Now, if it has the water softener loop, then you can go to Home Depot, you can go to a plumber. There's every variation from low end to high end to put these water softener systems in. The other nice benefit of having a water softener is beyond it doesn't build up as much on your fixtures in your home, is you'll find that usually like your water heater, for example, is going to potentially last longer. Water heaters in Arizona, because of the hard water system, they often, they only last typically about 10 years. Is a pretty good number to count on for your water heater. Now, the good news is it's not horrific price-wise, but if you do need to pay a professional to change out your water heater, it's not uncommon to expect to pay about $1,500. We do have home warranties here that sometimes you can have one of those in place to kick in, but if you're paying out of pocket, I'd say $1,500 is a rough good idea of a number that you can budget for with a water heater. Now, that is a regular standard old-fashioned water heater. We also have tankless water heaters here, which if you have a lot of young adults, teenagers in your home like we do, tankless is wonderful because it means instant hot water. Can't go wrong with instant hot water. Now, at a later date, I am going to talk about solar because you will see a lot of solar in Arizona. We are the Valley of the Sun after all, but that is a whole different entire video I could take up with that. So be sure to like and subscribe so when I do release that, you'll be the first to know about it. In the meantime, I want to talk about our electric panels. This was a first for me. So in the Pacific Northwest, usually our electric panels were somewhere in the house or possibly in the garage. Here in Arizona, it's actually really, really common that they are on the outside of the home, and even more interesting, they are usually in front of your fence. I know, it is the weirdest thing. We just kept scratching our heads. And if you're thinking, well, what about somebody just, walking by and flipping all your breakers off? Yes, that happens. As a matter of fact, it's a very common teenage prank that happens in neighborhoods. That's how we first did the head scratcher, going, why is our electric panel out front? Because we woke up and everything was off. Of course, alarm clocks didn't go off and yada. We've been in Arizona for 15 years. So, for those of you that are a little bit older, along my lines of my age, we used to have alarm clock. And so what many people here will do with their electric panel is they'll actually put just a small lock on it to prevent, kids in the neighborhood or anybody really walking by and just flipping off all of your breakers. So I mentioned fences or the electric panel being in the front of the block wall. Here in Arizona, we usually have a block wall. Most of our homes that are in a planned community come with a set block wall structure. So you're not going to see as many wood fences. Sometimes in the older, Phoenix area, you'll see more maybe cyclone fences and non-HOA areas, but predominantly in our East and West Valley, you'll often see block walls. Now, we are the Valley of the Sun, so let's talk about air conditioning. I had actually, somebody asked me a great question a couple days ago. It never crossed my mind that they thought it might be an option to have air conditioning in the Phoenix metro area. And so I realized, ding, 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 that's a great topic to talk about. Here in Arizona in the Phoenix metro area, pretty much every one of our homes comes with central air. It's not something that you usually have to ask for or add on. Now, the unit might be, 20 years old, but it typically is still a working, functioning unit. So our HVAC systems here are a little interesting. It's not uncommon to have the heating component actually up in the attic, out of sight, where you have to go through a scuttle to get in the attic to find it. And then a lot of times the cooling component is actually either on the side side of the house, or it's actually sitting up on the roof. Once in a while, you'll find them in a closet in the home. It just really depends on the age of the home, typically. So they are just something that you get with our homes. Now, our HVAC systems usually have a lifespan of about 20 years. However, I can tell you, I just sold one of my rental homes that the HVAC unit was 39 years old. It was pumping ice cold air and it just kept ticking. So of course, most sellers here, if the system is functioning, regardless of the age, that's typically how the home will be sold with that unit, despite the age on that unit. So HVAC is very important, as we all know. When it is 115 degrees out, that is something we want to have. Now, I have never actually personally sold a home or shown a home without a central HVAC system. I know back in the day, if you want to scroll back the calendar, maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, a lot of homes in Arizona had what we call swamp coolers. We pretty much all have central HVAC systems now. So that's a very good thing and something you will very much appreciate. The purpose of a condensate line is so that any excess moisture in the unit can drip out of that condensate line outside the home. So it's not trapped somewhere in the home. Now, typically we don't have to spend much time thinking about this, but during our monsoon season in the summertime, we get quite a bit of humidity, and that humidity creates havoc with our HVAC systems. As a matter of fact, what happens is that condensate line that's used to take that excess moisture out of the home sometimes gets clogged. And if it gets clogged, the excess moisture will start gathering in a overflow pan. And so if it's going over the pan, yes, that's going into your ceiling. And surprise, surprise, your ceiling will collapse, which typically involves now an insurance claim, a deductible, a time-consuming process to repair it, put the ceiling all back together. So the sad part about that is it's a super easy process to either clear that line yourself or to simply hire an HVAC professional to come out. They will blow the lines clear for usually under $100. So the big lesson there is really know where your condensate line is first, and secondly, when it is humid out, which again, we typically only see during the summer months like July, August, check your condensate line from time to time. You'll have a 90-degree elbow at typically the bottom of the house, and then right above it, another 90-degree at the top. If the bottom one is leaking or running water, dripping, that's good. That's really, really good. It means the system is working. If the top one is leaking though, no bueno. That is something you need to get taken care of right away, because it doesn't take very long for that overflow pan to fill up and spill over into your ceiling, and then of course, as I mentioned, collapse that ceiling. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, I came from an area where at that time we didn't really have HOAs. I didn't know what a HOA was, a homeowners association, until I moved to Arizona. Another word you'll sometimes see for it is a planned unit development, or a PUD. So from my understanding, Oregon and Washington have lots of HOAs now, but moving here was a new experience for me. So there's some things that you really need to know if you're looking in an HOA community, or if you currently live in an HOA community. One is they have additional rules and regulations called CC&Rs. So it's important to get your hands on a copy of the CC&Rs to know some things before you do them. So great example is if you wanted to paint your front door a certain color, your CC&Rs will often say what the process or the step is before you do that. You usually have to submit something to the architectural committee, and then you have to wait for their approval, and there'll be a set grouping of colors that you can use to paint your front door. Now, if you go ahead and do it without their permission, unfortunately, you'll probably get a little love letter that says, hey, listen, per the CC&Rs, you have to follow rules. You've got to put the door back to the color it was because you didn't take the proper steps to get approval first. Now, if you are buying a home, some other things that you really need to know about is maybe like me, you have a lot of people in the home that drive. So I think we have 5 vehicles. Well, if you can't fit those vehicles either in the garage or on the driveway, many HOA communities say that you can't park on the street. At least you can't park on the street overnight. So if that's a rule in there, you really need to know about that, because trust me, you do not want to be a target of the HOA and get letter after letter and then start getting fines stating that you're breaking the HOA rules. Another example with the parking situation is many HOAs will have it written in that if you drive a commercial vehicle, that you're not allowed to park it in the driveway. Or if you have commercial signage of any sort, maybe you work for a plumbing company and it says it on the side of your truck that any vehicles with commercial signage cannot be parked in your driveway. So there's lots of rules and regulations, not just pull your garbage can in and not just, you know, paint your house a certain color. There's many different components that it's a good idea to know what all is involved in your HOA before you become a part of your HOA. So the last part I'll talk about with HOAs is our gated communities. We have a lot of them in Arizona. One of the reasons I'm bringing it up with HOAs, you'll notice they tend to be quite a bit pricier. And there's a very specific reason for that. That is because the streets in a gated community are considered privately maintained by the HOA. And so there's a lot of extra expense and cost to maintaining those streets as private streets. Whereas in the other HOA communities, the city or the municipality takes care of and pays for the care and maintenance of those streets. As I mentioned before, be sure to like and subscribe because some of my upcoming videos, I'll be covering pools specifically, maintenance care, detection. We all know that those of you that move from out of state, you think you will die if you don't have a pool in your first home. So I absolutely have to do a video on that. And then as mentioned, I'll do an entire video on solar, the good, the bad, the ugly for what that means here in Arizona. And then I could not talk about moving to Arizona without talking about our landscaping. And that's our trees and shrubs and plants because I love working out the yard and the landscaping, even when it's like 100 bazillion degrees outside. But in that video, we'll cover, you know, poisonous plants and other items for your pets, do's and don'ts for what works here, our soil type, our watering systems for the yard. For example, just to give you an idea on plants, I know that so many people, they move here and they love their gardenias. Unfortunately, we have the worst opposite soil that you could possibly need for a gardenia. So unless you're going to put them in a planter, they're just not a great particular plant to put here, even though the nursery will sell it to you. Instead, we recommend jasmine. You'll see a lot of jasmine here in Arizona. So tune in, love sharing, put some comments below, let me know what you want to hear about, and I will share it with you on my next video in the good, the bad, and the ugly.